but it will be the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, you can just lay the folder on the table there. And if you could have a seat.
Thank you.
Another firefighter.
And before you begin, if you could, first of all, if you could pull the microphone up a little bit. It's not very flexible, but there we go.
Is that all right?
Perfect. Would you start off by stating your name and spelling each of your names?
Jeremy Norton, Jeremy-Norton.
Ms. Aldridge.
Take your mask
Stop
off.
there and remove the mask. Oh,
I'm sorry. I should have asked you that.
Thank you very much.
Please. That's appreciated.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, sir.
Oh my God, her again.
Where do you work?
I work for Minneapolis Fire Department. Currently, I'm assigned to Fire Station number 17.
And what's your title?
My title?
Yes.
I am a captain.
And how long have you been a captain with the Minneapolis Fire Department?
I promoted to captain in 2007. 2013 and 14 and 15, I was a battalion chief, and I demoted to captain in 2017.
And how long have you been with the fire department in total?
Since 2000, so 21 years.
Why did you demote?
Have you served in a variety of positions over that period of time?
I was a firefighter.
See how she
from
looks down?
2000
She's just reading.
until
She's not listening.
2007. Captain from 2007 until 2014. Battalion chief 214 to 216, and captain again 216 until the present.
And what's your educational background? What did you do in terms of training to become a firefighter in the first instance?
That's a bad question. What kind of
When I
formal
started,
training have you
I applied in 1998. The department, once one was hired, the department provided all of our training: EMT basic, hazmat, and then firefighter 1 and 2.
So maybe you could just describe a little bit what those things are.
It was 21 years ago.
When you say EMT
Right.
basic 1 and 2, what does that mean?
Affirmative. We are given training to the EMT basic level. Now, to apply, one needs to already be an EMT. That required classroom training as well as hands-on training, and then passing the National Registry EMT test, and then becoming a licensed EMT. We can have continuing education to maintain our certification. And that is every 2 years we have to recertify, both for the state of Minnesota, and then we have the option to maintain a national certification level. The firefighting was coursework designed and delivered by the fire department, and that also included the hazmat training.
Okay. Hazmat training sounds interesting, but is it just one subspecialty of the trainings that you go through?
It is, yes, it is a subsection, essentially.
I'm going to circle back to the EMT part of it.
Yes, ma'am.
Are you is it a licensure? Are you a licensed EMT or a certified EMT through your job as a firefighter?
I believe it is a certification.
Okay. So are you currently certified as an EMT?
Yes, ma'am, it is one of the conditions of employment.
All right. And are you up to date on all of those certification requirements?
Yes, ma'am, to my knowledge.
And again, based on what you were describing for training for firefighters, is that part of the sort of standard training that all firefighters get? Meaning, are they all EMTs in Minneapolis?
In Minneapolis, yes, ma'am.
Okay. So I'm going to get back to your day-to-day as a captain with the Minneapolis Fire Department. What are your job duties?
To which level? I mean, simply put, I'm in charge of maintaining the care and treatment and training of my crew, our equipment, and our station, which is broad. But then within that, I'm in charge of ensuring that we uphold city rules, regulations, have appropriate interactions with the public, work well with other agencies, maintain our training. I'm in charge of all documentation and records.
Man, he's in charge.
And then
In
on
charge.
all of
I'm
our
in
calls,
charge.
I'm in charge of
I'm in charge.
the overall safety and well-being of our crew.
Man, I'm a
and
government
ensuring
in
that
charge
we,
person. Lots of rules.
act appropriately.
So fair to say you're in a leadership position.
That would be affirmative.
And do you still, despite being, I guess, a supervisor or in leadership, do you still respond to calls as well?
Yes, ma'am. And as a crew, we work together.
Okay. And that's still part of your day-to-day, responding to calls?
Yes.
What portion of your work as a Minneapolis Fire Department employee is medical in nature? Do you respond to a lot of medical calls? Does fire respond to a lot of medical calls?
The number that I've seen for the department and then for nationally would be about 80% of our work is medical in nature.
So any of us who assume that firefighters just fight fires, is that not the case?
No, you've been watching the wrong shows.
But you said 80% medical.
That is what statistics show, yes, ma'am.
So the vast majority of your job is responding to medical calls as opposed to fighting fires.
That is correct.
So they're nurses with big red trucks.
What types of medical calls do you respond to? Could you give some
No offense to
examples?
nurses. Nurses have
Types
more
of things you
training.
do?
Sorry.
Certainly. The simplest way would be anything from birth through post-death that anyone calls 911 about. We will respond with either in concert with or ahead of or to support the paramedics.
So is it common for you to work with them in your job?
Absolutely.
And why is that?
Why do we work with them?
Yeah, why is there this,
Because they're
what's
both
the
doing
need
the
to
same
work
freaking
together?
job, and is government doubling
The
money?
paramedics are higher trained. They have a higher level of standard of care. They have more skills they possess. Their schooling is longer. But the idea would be an emergency medical response that if something is a life or death issue, having an EMT arrive with equipment, an AED, an oxygen mask, any of our other tools, we can provide care for someone who is in critical condition until the paramedics arrive, and then they can take over to a higher level, and we support them.
So you can get there quicker in a big red truck than an ambulance can in a car. Go figure that.
What would be called a heart starter, the automatic. I'm going to botch the letters right now, so I'll just say it is the heart start. It is what is used when someone is in cardiac arrest.
And are you, as an employee of the fire department, do you carry that type of equipment, or are you able to assist with that type of thing?
Yes, ma'am, both. We do carry it on our rigs. That is part of our standard complement, and I can use anyone I'd find in this building.
Okay. I'm going to direct your attention to May 25th of last year.
Yes, ma'am.
Were you on duty as a captain with the Minneapolis Fire Department on that date?
I was.
And did you respond to a call that evening?
Could you say that again?
Did you respond to a call that evening?
We responded to several, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Bad
and
question.
Specifically with respect to the area of Cup Foods, was there a call that you initially responded to that location for?
Yes, ma'am.
So maybe you could, if you could, please just describe what was the nature of the call that you were
She
initially
is a
responding
horrible
to.
interviewer and questioner.
We were dispatched initially code 2, which is a non-emergency response at, I believe, 8:30 p.m., give or take a couple seconds. And we were given very little information. I believe it said assist paramedics, perhaps, but just said engine 17, code 2, either 38th in Chicago or 3759 Chicago Cup Foods. And so, do you want me to explain more?
So let me just stop you right there, and I'll just ask a follow-up question. How did that information come to you? In other words, how did that call initially come into your fire department for your station?
The majority of calls will come in through central dispatch. So
She didn't ask
they
majority.
control
She asked how
the
that call
station
came in.
will open up, meaning the radio and the lights will come on, and then there are signifying tones that indicate generally the nature of the call, and then on top of that, the dispatch will provide whatever information they have as to the nature of the call.
So with respect to the evening of May 25th, you said around 8:30. Were you in the station at that time?
Yes, ma'am, we were inside.
And did you hear some particular tone that alerted you to this code 2?
Yes, it was the standard, the lights come on, the speakers click on with an audible click, and then there's two short tones, kind of staccato, and then followed by the dispatch announcing where we were going.
And does that come over your speaker system?
Yes, ma'am.
So it was at that time you were aware that it was a code 2 and the location where you were going, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you proceed to that location?
We did.
Did you get any other information about the call, either en route or at some other time?
Yes, ma'am.
And go ahead, what was that?
Shortly after leaving the station, dispatch came over the radio. At this point, it's our rig radio, and stated engine 17, code 3, which is red lights and sirens, emergency response.
So when you heard code 3, does that mean the call was elevated at that point? Meaning code 3 is more serious than code 2?
Affirmative.
Did you have any other information about that or the reason for that?
I believe the only information that we had on our screen initially was code 2 for one with mouth injury, I believe.
Okay.
And then it was updated.
And then when you say updated, was it just then a code 3
Affirmative.
without any supplemental information as to why?
No, ma'am, I don't believe so.
Okay. So ultimately, did you respond to the area of Cup Foods or 30th in Chicago?
Yes.
And what did you do when you arrived there?
The rig stopped. My partner and I got off the rig, and we looked around for a patient.
And when you got there, what did you see?
There were several police squads, one Park Police, I believe, and two or three Minneapolis police cars that I remember parked in the vicinity in the area. A couple officers were standing on the street, and a handful of people were outside.
Was there an ambulance there at the time that you were there?
No, ma'am.
And were you able to identify a patient upon arrival?
No, ma'am, there was no one on the street.
So what did you do next?
They got there after the ambulance took them away, I guess.
I basically went clockwise around our rig. I spoke briefly with one police officer, and then we went into the store.
And did you come into contact with anybody in the store?
Yes, ma'am.
And what was the nature of that? What happened in the store?
Could you be more specific, please?
Sure. Well, upon entering the store, did you interact with anybody who was
Leading.
in the area, who had been in the area?
Yeah, yes, ma'am. We spoke, as I said, I spoke to one police officer as I descended the rig, came around through a crowd of maybe 6 or 7 people who were at the mouth of the store.
When you went in the store,
vestibule
did you talk to
entryway,
anybody? Who?
And then I went into the store.
What was that
still looking for a
conversation?
patient.
Okay. So you went into the store looking for a patient. Did you have any interaction with anybody? You said there were a number of people, 6 or 7 people. Did you have an interaction with any of those people?
Ma'am, do you mean did I speak with any? I'm not sure what you mean by interaction.
Yes. Did you have a conversation with any of those people?
As I was walking through, I heard what people were saying, and then, but I was pretty much looking for a patient.
If you talked to the cop, didn't he tell you the
I might have
patient
spoken to
left?
someone who was working there briefly, and while I was looking around for a patient, essentially on the ground, I did encounter an off-duty firefighter, and then I briefly spoke with one of the police officers who was at the back of the store.
Oh, the female firefighter must
Okay,
have
so let's
bend
talk
his
about
ear.
those two things. So you interacted both with an off-duty firefighter and also a law enforcement officer who was present. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
So let's first start with your objective. You said you were looking on the floor for a patient. Was it your primary goal to find a patient?
Yes, ma'am.
And
Didn't the
when you were
cop-
not able to see one easily, and entered into the store, what did you do at that point?
Here's a tip for all you firefighters. When you show up and the cops aren't working on anybody and they called you and you don't see anybody and you have to walk around and try to look for a patient and nobody's saying he's over here and there's a bunch of people standing around, that may be a clue that the patient ain't there.
Description, I did not have anything else, and so I was essentially, yes, looking on the floor for someone. And at that point, though, the crowd that through which I'd walked was people were upset, and they
Not
were
responsive.
I was getting
She didn't ask that.
sense from them that there was an injured person, and that's all But so I was looking for someone on the ground.
Okay. Did you find an injured person on the ground?
No, ma'am.
So, what did you do next?
As I was, my partner mostly stayed and spoke with the off-duty firefighter who was agitated to distraught. I'm not somewhere between there. She was fairly upset, and as my job as supervisor is to kind of cut through a lot of the extraneous information and find what we actually need to deal with. And so I moved to the back, and I did see the police officer at the back of the store, which would have been the southeast corner of the building, talking to one of the employees behind the barricade, and then I approached him.
Okay. And then were you directed to another location?
Right as I was asking him what was going on, he said, I believe he said the medics left, they need you. And right about simultaneously over his radio and over ours, because we have separate dispatchers, we both had the information that the paramedics needed us at a different location.
Okay. And then you also mentioned an off-duty firefighter. Do you know who that off-duty firefighter was?
Do I know who she is now?
Her name, yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Genevieve Hansen.
At the time, did you have limited interaction with her?
I had worked, I'm sorry, if you're asking prior to that day?
Right. When you arrived on scene, did you immediately recognize her as somebody that you knew?
God,
No,
this
I-
woman can't ask a freaking straight question.
I think I walked right past her, and then she popped up to my left once we were inside the store.
Okay. And then after the fact, do you now know that that was an individual that you know to work with as Genevieve Hansen?
Prior to that, once we started speaking, I did a double take, and I clocked that I knew her,
Okay.
and then we spoke.
And what information did you have at that point in terms of what was happening and what was going on?
The police officer said that the medics had left and they needed us, code 3. Dispatch said the same thing, and then from the off-duty firefighter and from the crowd, I was hearing and inferring that there was an injured man who had been sustained injuries in a scuffle with the police, or in a situation with the police.
Okay. I'm going to put up on the screen what's already been admitted as Exhibit 68. Can we put that up, please?
He's drinking a lot of water because his mouth is dry. He's nervous.
All right. So you described your arrival.
And
Can you
then the
just
big
describe
red
what's
truck
shown
came.
in Exhibit 68, please.
Yes, ma'am. That is our fire truck, engine 17. That is me stepping out from the captain's side. We are facing eastbound on 38th Street.
Really doesn't
Cup
look that
Foods
clean.
behind us. There is a squad to my forward and right from this photo to my left. And I believe that was the police officer I spoke to whose body camera that was. So I was about to make contact with him.
So does this show you upon your initial arrival at the scene?
Yes, ma'am.
And if we could move to Exhibit 69, please. Did someone come off? So Exhibit 69 is now on the screen. If you could just describe who is pictured in this photo.
That is me to the right of the screen, and that is firefighter Jennifer Hall to the left, coming around from her side of the rig. She was a rookie who started with us at the end of March.
And so were you both responding together, essentially?
Yes, ma'am, she was my partner.
Okay.
Why do they have a hose
Can we
hooked
move
up?
to Exhibit 70, please? You described walking into the store and seeing some other individuals. Could you just describe what's shown in Exhibit 70, please?
Agitator, martial arts guy.
Yes, ma'am. There's looks like a police squad ahead to my left, north on the street. I believe that might be a park police squad to my left. 4 people outside, one of whom is off-duty firefighter Hansen. I did not recognize her walking through.
There's 5 or 6 people.
Do you recognize her now?
Affirmative.
Could you just, you can use the stylus or your finger, but it's a touchscreen. If you could just indicate where she is, please, in this photo. All right, you made a green mark above where, indicating Genevieve Hansen is. Can you just indicate where you are in this photo as well? All right, and there's an arrow showing where you've just made that mark. And then could you identify Jennifer Hall as well, please? All right, did you know any of the other individuals in this?
In this photo, no, ma'am.
And if we could move to Exhibit 71, please. I'm sorry, 72, please. All right, so did you ultimately enter the store and have a brief interaction as you described with a law enforcement officer in there?
Yes, ma'am.
And does Exhibit 72 show that? Maybe I should be more clear. What does Exhibit 72 show?
I believe it would be the body camera of the officer with whom we were speaking.
And who's pictured in this image?
I'm on the center. I'm in the center, and firefighter Hall is to the right.
And was this inside Cup Foods?
Yes, ma'am, towards the back of the store.
All right. And as you described, when you learned that there was no patient there, we'll go back to Exhibit 71, please. Now I've got Exhibit 71 on the screen. Did you then exit the store?
Yes,
Oh
ma'am.
my God,
And
what is the purpose of this?
Can you
To
just
bore us
describe-
to death?
Is that what you were doing in Exhibit 71 here?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So once you had the additional information, we can take that down. Thank you. What did you do next, and where did you go?
We were directed to meet the medics at 36 and Park Avenue.
Looking
South.
down, not listening.
We got back on our
Just reading
fire
questions.
truck, and we responded to 36 and Park.
And what did you see when you got there?
The Hennepin County Medical Center ambulance was parked on the east side of the street, just south of 36.
And I'm going to put up Exhibit 74, which has already been admitted. Ultimately, can you just describe what point of view this is showing in Exhibit 74?
Yes, ma'am. That is not me, but this would be the view from my seat.
And so in the foreground, is that the fire truck that you were in?
I'm sorry, yes. This photo is taken from the front seat of the fire truck facing the ambulance.
And is that where your fire rig parked once you arrived at that location to meet up with the ambulance?
Good grief.
Yes, ma'am.
And what did you do once you
at
arrived
that location to
at
meet up
that
with the ambulance?
location?
Again, my partner, firefighter Hall, and I got out of the fire truck and we went into the ambulance, entering from the side door.
And what did you observe at that point in time?
2 paramedics and 1 police officer and a patient on the stretcher.
What appeared to be the condition of the patient that you observed?
He was face up on the stretcher. He had an airway an advanced airway, so he had a breathing tube going into his throat. And he had the Lucas compression device, which is a CPR, kind of a pneumatic CPR device in place and working.
And when you say working, what does that mean?
It was pumping up and down to pump his chest.
A
pump his
mechanical
heart.
chest compression machine.
And first of all, this patient, was he later identified by name?
Yes, ma'am, it's George Floyd.
So you said that he had an airway in place and the Lucas machine was pumping. What did you observe about his overall condition?
I mean, other than that, he was unresponsive.
Right. What, I mean, maybe not other than that, but what do you mean by unresponsive? What did you see?
A person who is not, who basically who's.
She wants them to
it's
say
a confusing
deceased.
question. I'm sorry.
Not a good question. I apologize. Just tell us.
He was an unresponsive body on a cot. The airway was in place so that we could breathe for him, or so the responders could, or people could breathe for him, and the Lucas device was compressing his heart to get blood going through his body.
And when you say breathe for him, what does that mean?
I was not clear about that. And an airway device goes in through the throat, gets and basically gets better access into the lungs for some sort of airway and oxygen delivery device. In our case, would be a bag valve mask, a BVM, which is like a Nerf football sized compressible bag that we squeeze every 6 seconds to bring air into their lungs, and it's oxygenated air.
So when you say breathe for him, does that imply using that BVM and actually squeezing it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
She wants him to say he
I'm sorry,
wasn't
to your
breathing if
question,
that was
in
in
the
there.
absence of those actions, the patient would have been pulseless and unresponsive, not breathing, and for all intents and purposes, dead.
Okay. And were you aware of the status with respect to any pulse that was the patient pulseless when you arrived?
He had a machine
We
on.
did not check a pulse until we took over. Excuse me. They were working. We joined them. As part of their protocols, we did pulse checks multiple times from when we arrived until we arrived at the stay room at HCMC.
Did anyone ever find a pulse?
No, ma'am.
And when you first, just getting back to when you first got on this ambulance, you said you saw 2 paramedics. Was there a law enforcement officer who was also in the back?
He said that
of
if you'd
the
been
ambulance?
listening.
Yes, ma'am.
And when you arrived, did you essentially switch places? Did he exit the ambulance?
Yes, ma'am. He was, I believe, on the bench seat. I cleared him out, took the seat at the head, and took over ventilations for the patient.
And when you say ventilations, are you talking about that BVM?
Yes, ma'am.
So were you squeezing it for
Yes, ma'am.
the process to work?
Yes.
Okay. After the officer left the ambulance and you were working on squeezing the BVM, what happened next? Did you proceed to the hospital with the paramedics?
I'm sorry, those are 2 questions.
Okay, let's start with the first one. And maybe I can just rephrase
It's
it better.
horrible.
What did you do after you took over the squeezing of the BVM?
I myself continued that until we were cleared at the stay room at Hennepin County Emergency.
Okay, so did you continue to do that, perform that act, all the way until you got to the hospital?
Yes, ma'am.
And what did you do once you arrived at the hospital with the patient, Mr. Floyd?
We continued from the ambulance into the stay room, which is their critical care room. I believe there were 2 other cases, patients already in there, so the room was a little hectic. They were still assembling their staff, so I continued at his head, breathing for him for a short amount of time until their team took over and cleared us.
And once you were cleared, and what does that mean, cleared?
Well, it's a hospital. They have a lot of people who can do our job, so they basically kick us out so they can take over the more comprehensive care.
What did you do at that point, once you were cleared?
How do you mean?
Did you ultimately need a ride?
We left the hospital, and I oftentimes when we accompanied the medics down to the hospital on critical cases, our fire truck is not allowed to drive through lights just to follow us. Like, we'll be okay with the medics, and so they will respond, and depending on how far away it is, we can stand out on the street for several minutes. And additionally, I had
Our fire truck
radioed
followed
to
the
my
ambulance and
driver
picked us up.
to-
Good God, you guys are
to go back
horrible.
to the scene at 30th in Chicago to check on the off-duty firefighter.
And why did you do that? Why did you have the other members of your team check on the off-duty firefighter?
Ma'am, well, once, as I said, we came in with very little information, and even when I spoke with her on the scene, I had no understanding of the cause of her distress. So once we got in the ambulance and I saw the severity of Mr. Floyd's condition and the gravity, I understood. I was able to infer or put together what she had been talking about, and I understood the justification of her duress. And so I sent my crew back to check on her to make sure she was okay.
Oh, poor little
once you put those
firefighter.
pieces together and understood Mr. Floyd's condition, were there additional actions that you took after leaving the hospital?
Yes, ma'am. Once the fire truck came to pick us up, we kind of had a brief, kind of a debrief in the rig talking, because we had, my partner and I had a very different experience from my driver and the other firefighter, because especially during COVID, we were either going in one at a time, or because I had a rookie, I was trying to give her experience. So my senior firefighter and my driver remained on the rig for most calls from the end of March through midsummer. In this case, while my partner Jennifer Hall and I entered the rig and encountered someone who was not responsive, and since that way, the
Good God, I forgot the question.
police officer.
What the hell was the question?
Ask another question.
Oh, sorry.
Let's just back up for 1 second. You said that you and your partner Jennifer Hall
Yes.
were working together and you got on the ambulance. What were the other members of your crew doing, and who were they?
Yes, ma'am. I apologize.
That's a compound question too.
Stephen Mudek is a rank firefighter, and Tracy Trebell is my driver or fire motor operator.
So were all four of you together on May 25th
Yes,
of
ma'am.
last year? And I'm sorry, I just had to finish the question first so she can take it all down. But all four of you said were together on May 25th.
Nobody knows when you're
for
finishing a
Sunday.
question
Is
because
that
you
right?
rattle and throw in another
Yes.
question.
And who was it that you sent to go talk to the off-duty firefighter Genevieve Hansen?
I had FMO Trebell and firefighter Mudek take the rig back to the scene.
What does
And
it
when you
keep
say the
blowing?
scene, is that Cup Foods?
Yes, ma'am.
And where were you while that was going on?
We were in the ambulance at 36th and Park, and then we were en route to the hospital, and then they met us at the hospital.
And when you say they, ultimately did Tracy Trebell and Stephen Mudek from your team meet you at the hospital?
Yes, ma'am.
And then you said that the four of you had a debrief, is that right?
Briefly, yes.
What did you do after that?
Sidebar, please.
Sidebar. Yeah, her questions stinking suck. They're compound. What is she trying to ask? She's asking open-ended questions so this guy can rattle. Freaking outrageous. I'm going to pause it.
Here.
I guess
Just
she finished.
want to clarify a couple things on the time frame.
Yes, sir.
So I'm going to show you what's already been admitted as Exhibit 151. You're familiar with the computer-aided dispatch or incident detail reports?
Yes, sir.
This is Exhibit 151 is a computer-aided dispatch report from this incident. This initial call for EMS code 2 occurred at 8:20 and 11 seconds, according to this. Agreed?
That's what it says.
And that was upgraded, this incident was upgraded at 8:28, correct? To code 3?
Well, sir, it says something different above.
So multi-agency police? You're talking about that?
No, sir.
Pardon?
No, sir.
So you've got 330 EMS code 3 at 8:21:35,
Yes, sir.
all right? And then you have some info for EMS at 8:27:21,
That is correct.
and that is that someone had a male restrained on the ground, correct?
Yes, sir. It says PDF male restrained.
Fire was E412, which is the emergency ambulance, added fire at 8:28. Agreed?
That's what it says.
EMS alerted everyone that they were at 36th and Park at 8:31 and 12 seconds.
Yes, sir, that's what it says.
Then there's this Metcom call at 8:33 where EMS is asking for a fire department for patient condition, right?
Yes, sir.
At down here at 8:35 and 13 seconds, it says Minneapolis Fire Department to en route to Park and 36th.
That's correct.
And you were 2 minutes out at 8:36 and 7 seconds.
That's what I reported, yes.
And so you arrived at about 8:38, correct?
I'm not sure what time we arrived.
Thereabouts, but within about 2 minutes as of your call.
I believe so, yes. I believe it was 8:37, but yes.
Okay. So the original call for EMS code 2 was 17 minutes prior to when you got to the ambulance.
Could you clarify, please?
The original call, EMS code 2 for mouth injury at 8:20.
That is not for us.
Understood. But it's 17 minutes after the original call went out, correct?
That looks appropriate, yes.
You were called, or fire, I should say, was called at 8:28 and 36 seconds.
That was somebody's radio transmission, yes, sir.
And the fire incident was created 7 seconds later at 8:28 and 43 seconds. So fire was notified at 8:28:43.
Our dispatch was, yes.
And what time did you arrive, based on your recollection, at Cup Foods?
Our station opened up at 20:30. We arrived at 20:32 and change.
Okay. So again, 12 minutes after the original call for service.
Yes,
All right. And when you arrived, paramedics had already removed Mr. Floyd from the scene and gone to 36th and Park, which is why you didn't find him at Cup Foods.
yes, sir.
Okay. I have no further questions.
Any further?
This guy seems a little
Captain
anal,
Norton, you were
Captain.
asked a series of questions about your response time.
Oh
the
my
timing of
God.
that. I think you testified on
Spastic
cross
woman.
that the initial call you said regarding the code 2 mouth injury was not for us. Can you just describe what you mean by that?
Well, to the best of my understanding, the 911 system, which is many stories below us, there is a 911 dispatcher for civilian calls. There is a police dispatcher, there is a fire department dispatch, and there is an EMS or medics dispatcher. They are all in the same room, they are all in different channels. So if what I believe was a call from one of the police officers for EMS code 2 would have gone from that officer's radio directly to their dispatch. And then their dispatch would have made the decision based on information given, what level of EMS response to send.
So when you're responding to a call, this information isn't necessarily showing up for you on a screen somewhere while you're sitting in the station.
Ma'am, which information?
Exhibit 151 that
These
was
two
shown to
should
you.
be a
the CAD
team of
report.
freaking incompetence.
No, ma'am, that is a kind of more of an aggregate.
Okay.
Remember,
So,
people, this guy made captain. He's the
just
top
to
of
be
the list
clear,
of the firefighters.
What was the initial information that you received with respect to your firefighters in your fire station?
Yes, ma'am, I believe it was code 2. I don't remember what the dispatcher said over the air, but it was something to the effect of either respond to help medics or code 2 to Cub Foods, and then what popped up on her screen was one with a mouth injury.
Okay. So when would you have received that information?
As soon as the station opened up and the run was generated onto our screen by the
I
dispatch.
wish I knew what he
And
kept
when you said
blowing
the
on his
station
upper
opened
lip.
up and the run was generated, when would that have been?
8:30, 20:30, and 21 seconds.
So the information you received from your dispatch was approximately 8:30. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Anybody know what point anybody's
That
trying
would
to
have been
freaking make
after
here?
information communicated from other sources to other dispatch. Is that right?
I have no knowledge of that.
Fair enough. Thank you. No.
Oh my God! What a brutal cross!
When you step down.
Unbelievable. I think the only point was that the defense wanted is, hey, we got medical there and called within 8 minutes, 7 minutes, whatever it was. And when the fire department was called, they arrived in under 3 minutes, at 2 minutes and 20 seconds. That's the only relevant part of this whole freaking clusterfuck of a dispatch argument between this spastic DA that can't form a freaking question and this captain who can't answer a question. Jesus, that was painful. All right, we'll end it there.